number 3 action coming up. Mr. Moose joined at the analyst desk by the one and only Kendo. Kendo, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good, brother, and I am excited for week number 2. We've kind of shaken the jitters off. We don't have too much of that first ever cast together vibe going on anymore. So I'm looking forward to some great content. We are going to work to make it the very best we can possibly make it.
The very best. Hold on. Is it this way? No, it's that way. It's that way. Hey,
Yes.
there you go.
Yes.
That's what's up.
Anyway.
Ridiculous here at the analyst desk, starting things off, but it's going to be a great week. VBU Neon going to be up against GRIN Reapers here. Week number 3 action coming up. So a lot of our teams have had the opportunity to be able to play several series and have been able to kind of shake out where the bracket stands in terms of where everyone is at on the standing lineups, where, you know, MVP lining is at this point. Like, things are starting to shake up, and now getting into week number 3, that's when things really start to get going. Like, everyone should be expected to be able to perform really well. There shouldn't be those first or second game jitters, and all of these games are extremely important. And so, I mean, this one for VBU especially, you know, they're 1-5 coming into today. It's going to be a very challenged series for them. If they end up going 0-3 now, the split's going to be 1-8. They're going to be 1-8 in the split if they end up losing 3 games here today against GRIN Reapers. And that is definitely possible at this point. I mean, GRIN Reapers has been performing exceptionally well.
We don't want to not mention the fact that they were benefactors of the 0-3 vibe by, of course, the tenacious Dolphins were not as tenacious as we originally thought. Never really fully getting out of the water in the light league. So we have heard a new team, though, that is going to be installed in this week as part of the Excellency Light League. So congratulations to Team Ambition Golden Age. We're hoping that you can find your Golden Age despite the 0-6 start coming into the league on less than desirable circumstances.
No, I mean, Vixis was talking earlier in the chat saying that he was definitely 3-0. It was a 100% guarantee that they're going 3-0 this week. And so, I mean, I don't know. Ambition, Golden Age, they probably don't stand a chance. Obviously, Vixis is going to, you know, always be the prophet of the Light League, knows exactly what is going to happen in his matchup. So we'll see if they actually go 3-0 this week or if it ends up being a kind of a difficult week for them. But regardless of that, I mean, the standings, if you look at them, we've got a 4-way tie at 5th place between 4 different teams. Central Sentinels, CB Stonk Squad, Degenerates Ascension, and Cape Dogs Unleashed, all 2-4 in the bracket right now. And this week is going to really start to determine where that cutoff is potentially for playoffs. Some of these teams probably, you know, 2 of these teams are going to be lower than where they are right now. 2 of these teams could potentially have a really good day and perform well, get themselves into maybe place 4, place 5, maybe place 6, depending on how the other teams play. So, I mean, a really big week for a lot of these teams. I don't expect that 4-way tie to stay that way after this week. I think it's actually an impossibility at this point for anyone, or for that 4-way tie to still exist. And so it should be a really fun week and a very important week for not only those 4 teams, but every team involved in the league.
Yeah, in fact, all 4 of those teams are going to be having very interesting matchups going into this week. And I agree with you. I doubt there is going to be a 4-way tie right there at the cutoff for the playoffs here at the end of this week. I do think Team Ambition Golden Age are going to bring forth a very interesting mindset to everybody else who's already gotten a little bit of a head start going into the season. That being said, I'm looking forward to seeing how the teams interact, how the teams really push themselves forward. They say the playoff race starts now. I would say it really started with week number 1, but it's really going to gain traction here in week number 3 if you're able to get that 3-0, if you're able to get that 2-1 over an opponent that you must beat, or a critical opponent who may or may not be above you in the standings. Every single win is going to count. And I mean, 1 death, 1 CS can sometimes be the difference in some of these games, Moose.
And I mean, it has kind of felt like that, especially with a lot of some of the closer matches that we've had.
Mhm.
I mean, VBU Neon as a team, they have had some really long games in the league so far. I mean, just talking a little bit about the matchup here today, VBU Neon against GRIN Reapers. VBU has had a lot of very long games, 31 minutes, 32 minutes average at this point. So, I mean, when you get to that point, those death timers become a big factor in determining the outcome of the game. And then, in the last week, I mean, we saw them just kind of fall short on some critical objectives that they needed, especially in the mid to late game, that cost them the ability to be able to get a win against DAO or Divine Ascension. It's gonna be interesting to see whether or not that same pattern happens again today. GRIN Reapers, another team that has a really long game timer, playing for that late game, but they've got really good CS, they've got really good kills, they've got some good vision control as well. And, they've got two players on their lineup that are in the top 10 for MVP right now. Their bottom lane is extremely strong in this one. Let me just make sure where I'm at right now. Yeah, it's the Bully and Travis. Like, they're both within, 5 points of the MVP standings at the very top right now. So it's going to be, I think, really interesting to see if they're going to be able to perform well. If for some reason they fall short and VBU Neon's able to get a win on them, that could really hurt their standings in their own individual MVP races. But then on top of that, GRIN is trying to be able to get to, that first place finish. They lost a game week 1 to Cape Dogs. They're 5-1 right now. A sweep at this point will put them 8-1 in prime position to have a top 2, maybe even a first place finish, depending on how Lotus Black and how DAO play today. So really big, important games for both of these teams for different reasons. And it's going to be a fun day for sure, Kendo.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of those accounts. I might go a different direction on VBU Neon. Just I understand because of how long some of the games, it's very easy to be like, hey, let's focus on some late game comps. It doesn't matter how many stacks you have on Nasus. If Nasus is 3 levels below everybody else, it's still gonna have a very rough time. No matter how strong the late game truly is. I think where VBU Neon are going to have to focus the most, it's those objectives, and it's going to start with better vision control. Or just vision in general. They need to be keeping their mindset on what is up next. How can we play around getting that objective next? And then it's going to come down to Jungkook. Jungkook is someone who's a very CS focused jungler, not necessarily on the ganks. However, the ganks have been lethal, and Jungkook is leading the team, one of the top 2 on the team as far as the MVPR goes. You want to make sure that if you're Jungkook, you are leading the charge both in your vision as well as making sure you take charge of all the troops. Hey, we got a dragon in 30 seconds. We have 0 wards. I don't know if we can get this. Make the right decision at that point, and hey, let's go counter jungle. Let's get the other objective that's up here in about 45 seconds.
That is right on the money. I mean, that is something that I think we as the casters, and I think you guys as the viewers especially, I mean, watching VBU play, that's going to be the big question here is how does this bottom lane perform? Especially early game dragon control is going to be something that they want to be able to focus on potentially. If they're able to get ahead in the bottom lane, that could be a really good position for them. And also on top of that, they've got to be able to keep those objectives really keep those objectives throughout the entirety of the game as their focus. I think what we were talking about it before the show started was like last week they got 1 dragon against DAO. Like that was just 1 objective the entire game. That was really rough. Like that is a rough stat to have. And so if they want to be able to get these wins, objective control is going to be big. Laning control is also going to be something that's really important for them as well. We're going to see, how they are actually able to get all of those positions in. Are they going to be able to get themselves those objective controls? Are they going to be able to get a good early game to propel themselves into a mid game, to a late game win? GRIN Reapers has only 1 week of data so far to show for us. They've only had that 1 week. They had a bye last week. So, this could potentially be a big upset if VBU is able to go 2-1, potentially 3-0. We'll see. We'll see for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a tall task because Grin Reapers do come in with, as you mentioned, some of the best statistic players in the game. I was going through my scouting report, and I do know this much. Some of these players for Grin Reapers have one tricks, and we'll probably get into that a little bit closer to the banning phase. They have one
Mhm.
trick or characters that they're very familiar with in the 60, 65%, even some in the 70% win rate. So this is going to be very interesting to see going into ban phase. Do VBU Neon notice, okay, this is what they're good at, we need to avoid this at all costs? One of those I do want to get into is the battle for the Blitzcrank. And both Lo-Fi and the Bully are very attuned to playing Blitzcrank in their spare time, and we have seen it in a couple matches out of the Bully specifically. So I'm very interested to know, does Blitzcrank become a pick or ban situation? And if so, VBU Neon potentially having the advantage, do they leave it open and take the Blitzcrank to kind of nerf Bully in a situation?
I don't know who's gonna grab the Blitzcrank here in these games, no pun intended. But it does look like we should be ready to start up here in about a couple of minutes. So just real quick, want to segue into just a real rapid fire thoughts about the other games we're playing today. Central Sentinels going to be up against Enigma Eclipse. That's a pretty big matchup, I think, for both of those teams, with Central being 2-4 and Zenigma being 4-2. Like, whoever wins that one could potentially be the gatekeeper to the playoff picture. If Central actually loses and gets an 0-3 sweep, they're 2-7 in the bracket right now. That's a
Mm,
rough game if they end up falling in that position. But same thing for Zenigma. They end up
yeah.
falling in that. They go to 4-5. That could be, and then it would be Central Sentinels being 5-4. Both of them being possibly 5-6 in that regard. So very interesting game in that one. Lotus Black up against Cape Dogs Unleashed. Lotus Black 6-0, looking to be able to keep that flawless record, go 9-0 in the bracket today. Super excited to see maybe Cape Dog getting an upset there. That'd be cool to see. Cool to
Yeah.
see. We'll see if that ends up happening. Speaking of 6-0 players or 6-0 teams, DA going to be Divine Ascension Obsidian going to be playing up against CB Tonk Squad, another 6-0 team, having that bye last or week 1, looking to be able to keep that flawless record going, especially since they're going to be facing off against Zenigma next week. Could be an important matchup for their standings. And then, of course, to round it out, Degenerates Ascension. I don't know if they're getting the bye this week. I think they are. I don't want to confirm anything like that, but if they do play, they're up against Ambition Golden Age, and that'll be the first time that they're able to see it. Regardless, a lot of really important games here today.
Yeah, and I think that goes hand in hand with the point that you were making earlier. The fact is, of those 2-4 teams, I think this is a limit testing week. This is a test to see, okay, who is good, who is 2-4 by circumstance of, well, we didn't play that good, but we're actually a really good team, or who is 2-4 by, this is going to be trajectory downward to start the season. Each one of them is going to be going through their own test. This Enigma Eclipse, a team widely regarded as better than their record according to the power rankings, is going to be a very stout experience for the Central Sentinels. Then, of course, Cape Dogs Unleashed and CB Stonk Squad have to go up against the two 6-0 squads that have looked in their gameplay extremely difficult to beat, extremely difficult to go up against. So I'm interested to find out where this goes from here, but it's gonna definitely come out in the rub no matter what. You know for sure that you are going to see something change between these teams. Now, in the case that this does happen, Moose, and I just want to cover all of my bases
Mhm.
because this could get very interesting very quickly. We may end up seeing all of these teams still tied on that rare occasion that it does happen, and they all still remain tied. How are we going to do the power rankings next week? That's hmm.
Uh, well,
This is gonna be very interesting.
I'm gonna roll the dice and say that
Hmm.
it's definitely not gonna happen. I'm I'm going to lean on the side of I'm confident in the ability of Lotus Black. I'm confident in the ability of DA Obsidian. But again, even if that's the case, if they'll go 0-3, they could be potentially tied at 2-7 apiece. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. But still, we won't know until those games actually get played. It's going to be a fun one for sure. I think we're going to take just a quick break to get set up for the draft. Going to be week number 3 action here. VBU Neon up against GRIN Reapers coming up in just a second. Mr. Musi and Kendo going to be your casters for the day. Going to be a ton of fun, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Stay tuned.